All right. Looks like we're waiting for people to join. This is our first ever live stream on StreamYard, so I'm not totally familiar with it, but usually we'll wait till about 12:05, give people 5 minutes to get logged on, and then we'll get it kicked off.
Yeah. And I mean, just, I guess,
Sounds
to
good.
clarify what I'm saying is essentially like, I know, I mean, I'm the vice president of my company. Like, I have a lot of responsibility, and there's a lot that relies on these discussions, especially as we are moving into the fall, which is this business's biggest thing. And I do want to be clear, like, I am prepared.
So, guys, while I have you, the flow is going to be introductions. I have a slide for each of you. You can introduce yourselves. I'll call on you. And then we're going to start with Derek on like what is cost seg, and then we'll spend some time on that. Then we'll introduce Devlin to go through kind of how do people afford these properties, and then we'll come to Tony with like what separates good properties from bad, and then take it from there. All right, it's 12 on the nose. Let's see if people are on time. We hit 50 registrants, guys, so good job pushing it along. I wonder if I have to let people in or anything. Check my email, make sure I'm not getting spammed with how do I get on. Oh, I see Tim. Yes, there will be a recording. Do you guys see any other people? Oh, here we go. So there's 4 people on the stage. How do I see who's joined? For those who have joined, please let us know in the comments that you're here and that you can hear us okay. And then we're going to get things kicked off in about 3 minutes. Let a few people join. Right now, I only see Tim Miller in here. And I don't see him in people anywhere. So
Yeah.
nowhere to see him.
Looking like it doesn't really show us who's on. Oh.
Okay.
I guess we just can't see. What's up, Anthony? Anthony can hear us. Tunic,
All right.
What's up, buddy?
Hey, Chris.
Tunic, I'm in Rhinebeck.
All right, great. We're going to give it just about 90 more seconds. Hopefully a few more people join, and we will get things kicked off. You know, it'd be fun. Why don't we start with this? If you've joined the webinar, please click on the comments and just tell us where you're calling in from. So I'll go first. All right, we got Tiago in Miami. Another New Yorker, Tony. All right. What's up, Krista? Krista and I went to college together. She's a really successful agent up here in Massachusetts. Bennett, what's up, dude? Chris, Marcy's husband, used to work with Marcy at a Lego, actually, Tony, back in the day. You remember Marcy?
I remember Marcy. Yeah, awesome. What's up, Chris?
And Andrew is my CPA, my tax attorney, I should say, out of Needham. So after this, if you have questions, Derek and Andrew Gallant are really the guys to go follow through with it on. Theta Felcher from Cranston. All right. We got Steve, Arlington, Virginia. All right. It's 12:05. People that showed up late, we're going to get started. I'm going to make sure I'm recording this. New to this system. Let me see if I can hit record. Recording. Okay. Give me 1 second here.
Put in the comments what you think Alex needs to do with his all-white room.
Yeah.
With nothing on the walls.
I have to go into my settings. Let me just hit recording. Here we go.
Graffiti. It'd have to be something real estate related. Boston skyline, maybe.
All right, I figured it out. Let me just hit this button here, and it should record. Okay.
We good, Alex?
Yep, it is not hitting record. All right, we're just going to go for it.
Do it live.
So I'm going to share the screen over here, and we're going to get started. Present. Share screen. All right, can everyone see my slides now? Someone want to comment in the chat here. And Marcy, yeah. Can someone mention in the comments to make sure you guys can see it?
I don't think so.
No. All right. Add to stage. There we go.
Boom.
Beautiful. Technical difficulties. Our first time using StreamYard. But looks like we can see it now. All right. Perfect. Let's kick things off. This is our first ever webinar. I'm actually launching a podcast later this month called The Real Estate, and this is basically setting the stage for that. I've got some awesome panelists here today, and I'm excited to take you through, what we've learned over the last couple of years investing in short-term rentals. To go over the agenda, I obviously want to introduce our experienced panelists that bring a variety of different experiences. We definitely want to dig into what is a cost segregation study. I have some interview questions for our panelists. We're going to review a real cost seg example, actually 2 of my cost segs that Derek just did for me. And then we're going to leave the last 20 to 30 minutes or so for open Q&A. So you're going to be able to actually ask questions of the experts here, and we'll take it from there. There's 2 other agenda items that we'll get to at the end if we have time. We are going to be hosting a fall in-person event with free food and drinks. We're not sure we're going to do it yet, but we're going to ask your opinion on that. And then we have an offer as well. If any of you want to stay at any of these properties to go look at them and see how they're run, we'll give you a coupon code for those at the end of the conversation. All right, let's jump in. So first is the financial disclaimer. We're not financial advisors. I would seek one out if you need one. We do have CPAs and tax attorneys on this call. We have certified professionals like Derek, but really the purpose of this is sharing information and experiences. It's not personal financial advice. So now that that's over, I'll kind of introduce myself for those who don't know me. I'm Alex McKenzie. I'm a real estate agent in the Boston area, but most importantly, I'm an avid real estate investor and advisor. So I grew up just outside of Boston, and son of a general contractor. So grew up on job sites. Got into tech sales, had a couple successful IPOs. Figured what else to do with that money, but put it into properties. Did my first fix and flip in 2012, and then I've stayed on this path of buying 1 home per year for the last 10 years. And my goal is in 30 years, I'll have 30 houses, and half of them will be paid off. I bought my first Airbnb in 2020. So this is actually a newer topic. My dad grew up doing renovations and fix and flips, and now I almost solely focus on investment properties. In 2024, me and my wife hit $1 million in annual rental income. So we're in a really fortunate place where we've invested and made great strategies that we no longer really need to work. We can just live off those for the rest of our life. We want to help you do the same. In addition to the investing, I've founded 3 businesses. Top Shelf Vacation Rentals is my management company. I've started a software company in 2023 called Yada. It's to help short-term rental hosts with automated messages, content management, AI, workflows, and upsells. And then I obviously have the real estate brokerage. So feel free to follow me here on any of my social media. I will come to our subject matter expert for today. Derek, want to take over? Introduce yourself.
Appreciate it, Alex. Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. I appreciate you having me be part of this. It's a pleasure to have all of you here. My name is Derek Denard. I'm located in Greater Boston, Andover, Massachusetts, and have been working with Alex on his cost segregation studies. And in my role, I work with individuals and businesses for helping them to leverage technical and niche tax incentives, may they be federal or state level. One being cost segregation, and how does it apply to potentially a real estate portfolio you have or you're looking to build out. There's a lot of nuances to these opportunities that I'm not here to replace a CPA, a real estate agent, property manager, but fill a gap where demystifying the space. What details do I need to know? How do I do this the correct way? And ultimately lower what I owe in taxes every year to help grow my bottom line and keep investing in new properties.
Thanks, Derek. All right, Devlin, our loan officer.
Hi, everyone. My name is Devlin Harding. I'm a loan officer at Milestone Mortgage Solutions. We're Boston based. We're lucky to call ourselves the #1 mortgage broker in volume in Massachusetts. We serve over 25 states at the moment. Um, we have a lot of connections. The reason for our success is we have a lot of connections with the largest wholesalers and lenders in the country. So no matter what your dream is with these short-term rentals, we're the people to go to for your funding for those. And how do you get them? And more importantly, how do you get the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth? Like Alex, how do you get to number 30? And that's where I would come in there. I'm a UVM alumni. I studied finance. I used to work in the international stock markets before this. I worked at a Fortune 100 company, took the leap into real estate, was a realtor for a while, and now I'm a loan officer. So I love what I do, and I'm always open to talking, to see what your goals are and helping people out.
Thanks, Devlin. And one thing we should also add, there's a lot of HubSpot alumni on this. He's Mikey Zielinski's brother-in-law as well. So if you know his sister or Mikey, feel free to say hello. All right. And then Tony.
What's up, guys? My name is Tony Narcissi. I did tech sales in the Boston area for 12 years and did pretty well. Started investing in short-term rental properties myself. Started managing them for other people, finding them for other people to buy. Ended up starting a management business out of that and then leaving the corporate world a year and a half ago and moving to New York City. And now I am a licensed real estate agent in New York. I do a lot of work in the Hudson Valley and Catskills, and we manage really high-end, cool, bespoke properties in this region and in Cape Cod.
Thanks, Tony. All right, so we're going to get into the panel part of this session. This is actually one of my properties I bought back in 2021. Didn't look like that when we bought it, but we're going to get into cost seg and how buying something and fixing it up and just using it on this basis can really make a huge dent in your taxes. So, Derek, since you're the specialist on this, I'm going to come to you. Can you, in the most simple terms, describe what a cost segregation study is?
Yeah. So I know it's a term that some folks may have heard, maybe experts, or quite frankly, it's a new term. And what cost segregation ultimately is a tax optimization strategy. It's a time value of money, where we are reclassifying assets, interior and exterior of short-term rentals, into their respective lives to accelerate depreciation. So it leads to larger tax savings earlier on so that money then can be in turn invested back into the property, may it be renovations or down the road into future properties. There's your down payment on your next rental property, getting up to, say, number 30. It's a time value where $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow. So unlike an annuity where you've got some depreciation every year, it's leading to some tax savings. Why wait for that dollar to come to you, lose its value when you can take advantage of it today?
Awesome. So if we talk about the 6 myths of cost segregation and why I think a lot of people, including my CPA, Andrew, who's on, don't typically bring it up. What can we demystify some of the myths and maybe talk through a few examples?
Yeah, on the surface, cost segregation can seem like it's a simple study to perform, but when you really get into the nuances, it becomes very technical and then it becomes very gray. So a property doesn't need to be a large commercial property. It can be all the way down to a condo. It can be residential properties. And it leads into bullet number 2. It doesn't need to be newly built. It needs to be newly acquired. So you go out, you find a property, it's your rental property. Once it is acquired, placed in service, it's the perfect opportunity to look at cost segregation. What benefit can it bring me and ultimately lead to down the road? For a lot of folks, they think that, it has to be done in the year of acquisition. It's a great time to do it in acquisition, but maybe you've got properties, and like the ones that I worked with Alex on, he had those properties back in 2020 is when he acquired them. You're able to go back and claim cost segregation on a property that's already been in service. It just needs to be claimed on a open tax year. So, if you filed your 2024 taxes already, we're going to have to look to 2025, but that's right around the corner where you can take advantage of those. They are complicated. They are technical. When picking a provider, someone like myself working at Aiming, and I apologize, I didn't introduce where I worked previously, but we're technical experts, and there's different methods to doing a cost segregation study, but you want to maximize the value of the benefit, and that's going to come through engineer-based studies. Are they expensive? It's on case-by-case basis, but the return of the cost segregation benefit is going to far outweigh the cost.
Makes sense. And Derek, I pulled this specific slide from the deck you sent me about like typical depreciation, 27 and a half or 39 years. What are some examples of things that you're able to pull forward, and like what are the criteria you need to meet in order to make those? You have to spend a certain amount of hours working in real estate. Does the property need to be rented a certain amount of time? Can you do this on a 12-month lease, or does it have to be on short stays? Can you talk a little bit to that?
Yeah, it's, there's a lot to keep it brief. So when you purchase a property, first and foremost, we cannot cost segregate land. We have to remove the land value itself. Now you have your depreciable basis. What's important to then note as we're looking at this screen is when was the date that it was acquired, and then when was it placed in service, ready for its intended use. And there are different scenarios that require close examination in terms of when you're going to be able to benefit and for how much. When we're looking at the depreciable basis now, two types of property we have to look at. Real property, which is your roof, your windows, that if you were to basically take those off, it's not a house. The components that if we were to remove them, personal property, those are the types of assets that we can cost segregate. So when we're thinking about a residential property, it's 27 and a half years. Carpet doesn't last that long. So why wait for that money? Put it into the 5 or 7 year bucket, pushing it up front. Now, two types of residential properties out there today specifically is short-term rentals. Now, the benefit can flow through to either offset the passive income, which is the tax liability of the property itself, or if you meet certain requirements, it can flow through and offset active income. Maybe you got capital gains because you sold some stocks, a past property. You can offset those with cost seg. The two requirements for a short-term rental are the real estate professional status, which is very rigorous. Ultimately, it's like working a 40-hour job per week on top of your regular one, or the material participation test, meeting one of those 7 requirements, which is a little bit easier to meet, but obviously with the short term, you're more involved with that property. On the other side, long term, real estate professional status, and if you don't meet that, it's just going to be a passive liability offset.
So, in other words, if you are a real estate professional, you probably know it. Because it means you're doing real estate all the time, you're an agent full time, you don't have another job. And if that's the case, if you're like me and Alex, you can get a lot of really big tax advantages from this with any property pretty much. But if you're a working W-2 person, really the only way to do it is through short-term rentals, the only way I'm aware of. And I think that's kind of the net of this. It's like the big tax savings, if you're looking for that, is really only short-term rentals. You can't buy a multifamily apartment and do this, right?
Correct. And yeah, the short terms, they do require more work on yourself as the owner of the property, but it opens the door for more benefits. And ultimately, I think that's, everyone wants to be patriotic, but pay their fair share of taxes.
Yep.
Or none.
Yeah. None sounds good to me. All right. So we will go through like a basic, I don't want to get too into the weeds here, but like, let's just say, you were buying a $1 million home. let's use that one that we talked about in Bourne, Massachusetts. I think it was 1.25. The land value is really important, right? Because if you buy something on Martha's Vineyard or Nantucket where the land is worth $1 million and the house is worth 200, you can't depreciate the 1.2. It's really the value of that structure. So that place we bought with one of our clients in Bourne for 1.25, land is almost valueless in Bourne. We're able to depreciate about $1 million of that 1.25 purchase price. What would something like that look like, right? If I made, call it $250,000 a year in a W-2 job, and I did something like cost seg, how much roughly could I save? Is it my whole tax bill? Like,
Yeah, there's a lot of factors that do go into a property in terms of renovations. Renovations can be cost segregated and timing of those. But if we're looking at just the original purchase, say it's $1 million worth of depreciable basis, typically with residential properties, depending on the state of the property, the assets on the inside, we're looking at anywhere between 30 and 35% that can be reallocated to shorter class lives. So let's just say 30% for round numbers out of $1 million, we've got $300,000 worth of increased depreciation. Now,
and that's year one, right? The year
potentially, it's going to depend on when the property went into service, because as mentioned, we can look back. And so there could be some scenarios, but this year is 100% bonus, meaning, hey, if I buy a property this year, cost segregated for 2025, it could be all taken in that first year. So 300,000, it's above the line. So for folks that rely on their CPAs, a financial planner, deductions and depreciation ultimately determine your AGI. So they're subject to federal and state tax rates. And just roughly speaking, say it's a 33% marginal tax rate, you're looking at about $100,000 in tax savings that then you would be able to take. And if you can use it all, it would offset $100,000 this year. If you can't use it all, the great part with cost segregation is it's going to stay on your books and it's used until it's depleted. So if you had a $75,000 tax bill and then you have $100,000 in savings for 2026, you've already got $25K on the books.
That's a good illustration there, Tony, in the chat. If you see from Tony,
I put spaces between it, but I guess they don't work.
didn't format too well.
That's kind of the net, guys. That's a real example. If there's any questions as we go through this, please put them in the comments.
Yes, toss them in the comments. And then obviously this changed recently, right, when Congress passed the big beautiful bill.
Yep.
So if you were doing this between 17 and 22 when you're putting that property into service, like a lot of mine, you were getting 100% bonus, but it tiered off over the last few years. And had you bought one in like 2024, for example, the bonus would not be 100, it'd be 60% pull forward. That's no longer the case. 2025, 2026, and 2027, to my understanding, is now 100%. Derek, does it tier after that, or is it only these first couple of years?
No, as it stands, it's going to be 100% for a couple of years here. And then, so again, cost segregation is on a per property basis. So if you bought 2 properties before the end of the year, get them both into service, utilize it, both benefits would be stacked on top of each other and be 100%. So if you did have a $200,000 tax bill this year and each property, like the Bourne properties, 100 and 100, you've negated it to be 0. And moving forward, it's 100%. So it's a great way to pay for renovations, or with 100,000 that's kept in your pocket, that's a nice down deposit on another property.
Yep. So for someone like me that my income varies, right? I've actually filed or created these cost segs, but I'm not filing them until this year for my October 15th filing. So you don't have to do it, right? If you're in private equity or you're getting a big bonus or raise next year, you could do that cost seg now, see what the savings would be, and then figure out when you want to actually deploy it against your income. So we'll move on from cost seg for a second. I want to introduce Devlin. He's the one who, unless you're buying these things in cash, which we do not recommend, he's the one that can help you actually figure out, can you afford this, right? So Devlin, a guy like me, like how do you afford 10 properties? Like, what do you need to do? How do you afford the first one? Do you have credit score limitations? Do you need a job, or do you have certain products that maybe you don't even need a job? You could be self-employed, or you could just have good credit. Could you talk us through some of the options for financing these?
Yeah, absolutely. So they're going to generally fall into two buckets. You're probably going to either do conventional financing or DSCR. One is called a QM mortgage, and one is a non-QM. With QM, they're more of the kind of standard mortgages that you think of. I'm going to live in this place. First time home buyers, maybe 3% down, something like that. When you start to look into investment, we're saying, hey, I'm no longer going to be paying this mortgage. I actually want somebody else to pay it, right? So as far as underwriting goes, that adds a very large aspect to it, to make sure that someone can repay this debt. A lot of times people are going to not necessarily qualify for conventional financing. But you might have a little bit of a nest egg saved on the side, or you might have equity in your current home now. That route is going to be a DSCR loan. Most of these investors who are going to do the short-term rentals, they're going to go this route. You're generally going to need about a 15 to 25% down payment. That varies based on the property and the ratio. So DSCR stands for debt service coverage ratio. It's a very simple equation. What is my mortgage? And can I cover that mortgage? As long as it's 100% covered, usually we're going to get the green light on the property. I have seen it go as low as 80%. Of course, the ideal situation is going to be 120%. 140% is probably a grand slam. If you add 140%, you probably should take Alex, because he found you essentially a small business that's going to provide you income. But you generally need a 640 credit score. I've seen some people get away with a little bit less, but 640 is where you really want to start. The better your credit score, the better interest rate you're going to get. So as far as income, if you're going to go with the conventional route, I have to see your ability to repay and say, Alex, well, what did you make last year? Did you have any tax deductions if you own your own business? A lot of people do, because they're smart. They've talked to, Derek and any other CPAs and stuff like that. It's really going to affect your ability to repay that mortgage. So you probably won't qualify for that. So that's where DSCR comes in. Basically, DSCR qualifies the property and its ability to cover that mortgage, and not your income. We actually don't look at your debt or your income when we do a DSCR loan. So
Got
as
it.
long as you have that down payment, and as long as you have a 640 credit score or higher, case by case basis. But I'm going to look at the property. I'm going to get the data for the rents. More than likely, for something like a short-term rental, we're going to use AirDNA. They're very reputable as far as what are the nightly rates and what can you expect. The beauty of the DSCR loan is I can make a case for any property, right? It's not like I have all the government regulations and the red tape and your ability to pay. It's, hey, my investor knows they have an appetite for these types of loans. Let's make the case, and I'm going to show you the data, and I'm going to input the data into that simple equation and make sure that the investor they want to lend you the money.
Yeah. So if you have a mortgage today and you have a high debt to income ratio, maybe some college loans or some student loan debt, DSCR is kind of the path. If you make a ton of money, you can probably afford one of these conventional. Once you go past one, you need a couple years history of that rental income covering your debt before you can go and get the next one. So DSCR is a really creative avenue where I've seen a lot of my clients take advantage of it. Say, there's no way I can afford another house. Like, I'm capped out. I make $100,000 a year. My mortgage is already $6,000. I can't do anymore. And they've been able to do it. I've had, I think, 3 clients this year have properties that have brought in over 6 figures in revenue that they've launched this year. And all 3 of those were DSCR. And all 3 of them, if you ask them, could they afford a second home? They couldn't. And now they're all cash flowing 3, 4, 5, in some cases, $10,000 or $12,000 a month from a single property.
Right. And I mean, it's a combination of two. You're going to more than likely you use the conventional to pull some equity out of your properties. Use that money as a down payment for the DSCR.
Awesome. Tony, any comments on DSCR? I know you've purchased a few properties a couple of different ways, but any other pros or cons you want to weigh in on?
No. That lots of different ways to get financing on these. Obviously, you want to make sure it all makes sense, but that's the basic idea. If you ever wondered, like, how does this guy or girl have 30 houses? Like, you can't just use conventional mortgages for very long. They are made for your average person who's going to own 0 or 1 property at any given time their whole life. Your average person is not going to go acquire 20 rentals. And so if you want to be that's okay, but you're going to have to use different strategies and different products that are not made for the everyman or the everyone. And that's where these things come in.
Makes sense. So that actually dovetails nicely. Like, Tony and I spend probably, 25% of our time what we call underwriting properties, where we find a property and we're trying to project what it could do. So maybe you could tell us some of the pitfalls that you see when underwriting a property. How do you find a profitable Airbnb versus one that just breaks even? How do you think about buying a diamond in the rough for something that's turnkey and will ramp faster? And maybe share a couple of experiences with not only your own properties, but potentially a cool story or two about maybe a client you've helped.
Yeah, sure, Alex. It's a big question. I think everybody who gets into short-term rentals learns through doing, above all else. Right? I spent a year plus learning everything I possibly could before I bought my first investment property, and then I, thankfully took action and bought one. But I learned so much more after that step. First house I ever bought for investment purposes was a 4-bed house on Cape Cod. It was a cute little place in Yarmouth Port. I paid $665 for it. I was hoping it would do $90,000 or $100,000 a year in income, based on some numbers I had looked up on sites like AirDNA. Ended up doing more like 70 to 80 over the first few years, and it made money. But at the end of the day, it wasn't making as much money as I wanted it. And so Alex actually helped me sell it for about $125,000 more than I paid for it 2 years later. If anybody has questions about why I sold that one or what the numbers were, we can talk offline. But the net of it is, it was kind of just a normal house. It was a 4-bed house that looked like all the other houses. We designed it a bit better, so it kind of popped. But with short-term rentals, you really want unique properties that are more in demand, and there's not as many of them. That's where you make real significant cash flow off these things.
Let's talk about that unique factor, because some people think that's just large format or waterfront. Like, how could you take an average house and make it unique? Like, design, can you add certain amenities that drive a ton of revenue and clicks and conversions?
Yeah, it depends.
Maybe talk
on the
about
market.
Carl's house that he's got in Plymouth. That one's pretty sick too.
That one's pretty sick, and it's because it's unique, right? So the actual property itself really matters. You can find properties that will break even easily as short-term rentals, but that's not what you want. Typically, with a short-term rental, you want something that's putting a couple $1,000s in your pocket every month, and maybe more, especially if you want someone else to manage it for you. So a few examples. We've got a property on the ocean in Plymouth that has an indoor pool. It's like the only one, right? It's the only one in the area.
Yeah, you want to swim in the winter on the South Shore, that's your only option.
Yeah, my Cape House, my little normal Cape House that there's a million of them, did 0 in revenue 4 months in a row over the winter because it's super seasonal. This place, its worst month was 13,000 in January because it's got an indoor pool and it overlooks the water. So finding things like that in different markets on the shore of Michigan, indoor pool will murder.
Yeah. And a lot of people think these are out of touch investments too. Like, it's not some luxurious indoor pool. It's a vinyl pool that's probably 12 by 14. It's tiny. It's basically a shed attached to the house. And that's the thing that me and Tony both have an eye for. It's like, could you add an indoor pool? Could you add a pickleball court? An indoor pool, if it costs you $50,000, $60,000 to do, and it's going to make you $100,000 extra in your first year, do it. Right? There's also little investments you can do, like laptop-friendly workspace is a new filter on Airbnb. I have this stand-up desk. I have 4 of them in every property that I have. So people want to work from home, do a corporate retreat, they can be comfortable. So it doesn't have to be these big grand things. It just needs to be unique. So if you go onto Airbnb and you're searching, like put in a bunch of random filters. And if like you put in like pool, waterfront, hot tub, stand-up desk, and kid-friendly space, and there's literally nothing in your market, that's the easiest way to identify if it's unique. And maybe it doesn't have those things today, but you could use that cost seg, get that $100,000 back in your pocket on April 15th, and then deploy it into the property to make it actually do more revenue. And that's
Can you
probably
guys
my
see my
biggest
screen?
finding. It's like I don't take my money and just stick it in my pocket. Almost every ounce of profit I pull out of my Airbnbs, I shuffle right back in. I do one major project per year. And now my house that I'm going to show you in a few minutes is like, it was this rinky dinky little 3-bed, 2.5 bath. It's now a 5-bed, 3.5 bath, new beach, new addition, additional bathroom. It just continues to do better. And when I look at my revenue, it's like 15 grand in July in 2021, 18 the next year, 22, this year 37. And it's like I'm also making tax benefits by using that expense against my rental income. Sorry, Tony, you jumping in there?
That's okay. I was just going to say, yeah, the pictures are not even good. It's not very nice, but it's finding these unique amenities. Can you guys see my screen?
Oh, let me put you on the stage here.
I'm sorry, I'll head
Okay.
outside in 1
Yep.
minute. I just needed to charge a bit. Yeah, here it is. We haven't even put new pictures up yet of this property. We've updated a bunch of stuff. Here's the pool. I mean, it's pretty rinky-dink, but through study and through looking at websites like AirDNA, which shows you how much revenue these different properties are doing approximately, and through working with people like me and Alex, who like we manage these properties, we own these properties, we know how much money they actually make. You find out what matters in different markets, and then you figure out your budget, and then you find a market that works for you, and then you execute. Right? That's really all it is.
Thanks, Tony. That's super helpful. So you can check out Tony's website. He's got a handful of properties on there. Maybe tell him about your Hunter house. That's probably my favorite property of all my friends at the moment.
Yeah, sure. So this is the best one we've done so far. It's a 9-bed, 7-bath lakefront property next to Hunter Mountain. I don't know how we got it for the price that we did, but it had been listed for $2 million. It kept coming down. I kept just annoying the listing agent, and it was under contract. And I texted her again anyway, like a month later, and she was like, "Hey, you know what? It actually fell out of contract 2 days ago." So we moved very quickly on this. I got this one with a partner who put up, frankly, all the capital on this deal, and I operate it. This property, currently, we launched it in January. It has 259,000 booked for this year already, and it should end the year at like 360, and without cleaning fees.
$30,000 a month for something you paid. What did you pay for this?
The mortgage is
$8,000.
So that's
pretty good profit.
That's what's possible. It's not easy. And every property I've been involved with, the profit gets bigger because I learn more, right? That's kind of the point. So anyway, part of this is like, can we help you guys fast track this if you're serious about doing it? But yeah, you got to find unique properties. That's the only place that big on the lake with the views by the mountain. It's legitimately the best property in that market. And we just captured on it. You don't need many. Right? You just need like 1 or 2 of these.
1 or 2 of these is retirement zone. If you have 4 or 5 good ones, you can make $1 million a year doing this. So I'm going to go do a quick review of 2 properties that Derek just did my cost seg for, so you can actually see how the sausage is made. And again, I didn't buy these properties for a lot of money because I bought them both like pre-COVID, kind of during COVID. But if you buy one now and the price is doubled, the benefit's much bigger. So people get scared of these big rates. Well, guess what? You can write off your mortgage interest against your rental income. If you buy a bigger house that's worth more, guess what? It's a bigger tax benefit. So if you can find something like Tony's that can rent for $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 a month, even if the mortgage is $9,000 or $10,000, it's like, it's really not that scary. It is maybe if it's your first property ever, but I personally believe like you're better off buying something in like the 950 to 1.3 range than something like Tony's first Cape property at like 6, 7, 800. There's a million of those, but there's only so many people that are ballsy enough to buy a property that has 5 bedrooms on a lake, or even 2 bedrooms at the top of a mountain that has a zip line, right? That unique factors need to be just huge. So I've got 2 properties here. Many of you on this call have been to this property. It ain't anything special. It's on the Milton Three Ponds. I'm sure Steve Kleur will comment about the water quality there, but it's not some insanely nice Lake Winnipesaukee, Newfound Lake, Merry Meeting Lake. It's a decent little pond. It's a couple miles long, and I bought this little house. It was a prefabricated house. It hadn't been touched in really 20 years. The land's about 2 acres dry and some wet acreage as well. I bought it for $500 on the nose. I actually left Steve Kalora's house from Charlestown, drove up there after a night of partying and made an offer and got it accepted. I've done quite a bit of work to the house. I added a huge addition I'll show you in a second. And Zillow and Redfin doesn't even know that I've done any work to this property. And just in appreciation, the value has doubled. If I were to sell this property today, I could probably fetch 1.4 to 1.6. And I've probably put 180 to 220 or so into the property. And like I said, the rents have just skyrocketed. So in addition to making a ton of cash flow, Derek actually helped me identify the depreciable basis. And maybe Derek talk through some of the numbers on something like this. Like, how would this impact my income?
Yeah. So as we talked about earlier, you had purchased property, cost seg, flew under the radar for you. So you got every year a little bit of depreciation, equal tax savings, but you came into a pretty big tax year this year. And when we were looking at your depreciation schedule, working with Andrew, identifying opportunities, this property fell into the sweet zone. It was a 100% bonus year, meaning all of that benefit from cost segregation could be taken in the first year. Now, as we mentioned, we can't depreciate land itself. So we had to remove that. And so we were left with that 450 as your depreciable basis. Then with looking at, the assets, how much we're going to be able to reclassify, we've got, about 117,000 there. And then ultimately with your tax rate, which does fluctuate year by year, but for this, we're looking at close to 50,000 in tax savings. So, all right, I can reduce what I owe. And so that's how kind of it boils down to that 50,000 number.
Yeah,
Now,
the way I look at it is I put 50,000 down to buy this house. So I'm essentially getting my total down payment back. And, because I've waited a couple of years and the market's gone up, I've also tripled the value of the investment, which, talk to a guy like Devlin. Devlin's probably going to call me after this, like, why the hell haven't you taken money out of this property and bought another one and done another one? So it kind of goes in circles. If you're able to get cash back from the government, keep deploying it, right? I have a client who may or may not be on the call, so I won't mention them by name, but their plan is to do one of these every year. They're a high income earner, and it's like, why would I not do one of these every year, manage it myself, and then call somebody like Tony in year 2 and pass off some of the co-hosting responsibilities?
Yeah, I think it's it's great with the 50,000. That's down payment, potentially on a property, or if you have a big enough portfolio and you've never done cost segregation, maybe you utilize it on 2 properties. 50,000 times 3, there's 150,000, and that's 10% of a $1.5 million home, where it can really stack up and make a big difference.
Yep. So this is another one that I bought, I think, the year after, once Lebanon started doing fairly well. Another 100% bonus year. Again, I bought this in like kind of horrible condition. It had been built in 1988. Still have the original water heater. It's a super soft, which is just crazy to me that it's been, 36, 37-year-old water heater still kicking. But I've done a ton of work here, and I'm going to work with Derek on these to talk about the repairs and the upgrades and all the stuff that we've done. I'm going to add that one back. All right, so we've got those 2. And we are basically through our presentation point. and it took a lot longer than we thought. So let's just open it up for Q&A now and jump right into it, and then we'll go to the event poll at the end. So if you've got any questions, toss them into the chat, and I will field them and figure out the right expert to answer it.
Just Alex, if I can add too, because you mentioned the renovation aspect, and happy to talk with folks one by one. Renovations, depending on when those are complete, would either be included in a cost segregation study, or they can be done on a separate cost segregation study, and ultimately lead to partial asset disposition, where you can write off, get rid of those assets so they're not on your books anymore, and you replace them with new values. So there's some strategy depending on when you plan to do renovations and how it may impact your bottom line.
Yep. Love it. I'll start the questions off for those on the line. Feel free to put some pointed questions into here. I'm going to give all three of you the same question. Like, what's the biggest deal you've seen done? So in Tony's world, Tony, what's the biggest booking you've ever gotten at any of your properties? Derek, what's the biggest tax benefit you've seen in a cost seg? And Devlin, what's the largest loan you've ever closed? Love to hear about that.
Somebody just booked the Plymouth house for August for 2 weeks, and they paid $32,000 for a group of like 12 people. We actually, there's a crazy amount of that goes to taxes. Speaking of our favorite uncle, Sam, there's a bunch of that goes to taxes, Airbnb fees, etc. So the actual net to me and the property owner, I think, was like 28 or something. But yeah, these people paid 32 grand for 2 weeks at that property.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Derek, for you, you can answer Eliana's question too. Reliable cost seg company. Eliana, that's what Derek does. But yeah, I would love to hear about your biggest cost seg.
Yeah, and I'm happy to meet with her, to meet with you afterwards. And Amy has been doing this for quite some time, the technical niche incentives for 39 years. I worked with a developer company based out of New York. They had purchased 10 properties, and I would say total depreciation was about $12 million. And so every property a little bit different, certainly yielded a pretty big tax return. But for somebody that relates to maybe the folks that are here today, I had an individual I worked with, 20 properties, and he had about $1.8 million amongst those 20 properties in depreciation. And his tax rate was pretty high. It was a high net worth earner. And I want to say it was close to 40%. So doing the math, he got a pretty substantial return.
Sweet. Devlin, largest loan you've done?
The largest loan that our company has seen is 3.5 million. I believe the loan limit is 4. So it's
Yes,
pretty
sir.
much as close as you can get. It was actually a single family, believe it or not. Most people think it's going to be, 10 units, 12 units.
We have a property that would be an amazing cost seg candidate coming on in New Hampshire with my partner. I don't know if you guys know Sean Bakhtiari. We're going to be listing it for $22 million here in the next week or two. So stay tuned for that. That'll be all over my Instagram story. It's the most ridiculous estate you've ever seen. It'll probably break a record for New Hampshire sales price. All right. I've got a question here from Andrew Gallant, my CPA. Derek, can you describe a cost study for something that's already placed in service, such as these 2 rentals? How does that work?
Yeah. So if you have properties that are already in service, never use cost segregation. First things first, happy to connect with you, be able to run numbers. Let's see what the benefit is. Is the juice worth the squeeze? There are a lot of factors that do come into play, but like your properties, Alex, we identified these 2 that certainly made sense. First things first, it's got to be on an open tax year. So making sure planning wise where we're at. As part of the process, there is doing the analysis, preparing all of it. But under the rules with cost segregation, we're going to need to calculate a 481A adjustment, quote unquote, depreciation that you've missed, sort of signifying I should have been taking from the beginning. That is a number that a CPA tax preparer is going to need. as well as Form 3115, which is a accounting method change. You don't need to amend a prior year's return. Like I said, open year, but you're going to need that 481A adjustment number along with the Form 3115 to be able to claim the benefit in the open year.
Makes sense. So I'm going to go to Adam next. How do you get started? Yeah, I think talking to someone like me or Tony is first steps. I have a whole checklist of if you really want to do this. I try to scare you first, but I'll get you on a call. I typically take calls at 8:30 p.m. and 9:30 p.m. after my kids go to sleep, so we can definitely talk. For Krista, how should investor prepare or pivot for local regulations tightening or changing? This is probably the most important question we didn't talk about, because the biggest risk with Airbnb is that your town could shut it off. All I can say is from an advice perspective is Google the town name in short-term rental ordinance. Bourne, Massachusetts, short-term rental ordinance. Quincy, Massachusetts, where Chris is from, short-term rental ordinance. Boston's obviously very tight. Quincy's very tight on their regulations. My perception of this, and Tony can weigh in as well, is use the government regulations to your advantage. If you're in a town where you can only have one or you can only have 2 people per bedroom max staying, use that to your advantage. Buy the 10 bedroom and sleep 20 people. No one's going to be able to compete with you. A 3 bedroom is not going to be able to shove in 10 bunk beds and say 20 people can sleep here. And then in terms of pivoting, that is difficult, right? There's very few markets in the Massachusetts area like Duxbury and Newburyport, Plum Island, for example, where you can both live there, sell the property, and use it as short-term rental. It kind of works both ways. Most towns, I buy in these second and third tier towns that have shit school systems, but I buy a monster house or something on a lake that maybe nobody wants to live there and put their kids in school, but they'll vacation to, right? So pivoting is difficult. And I would recommend using a 1031 exchange. If you buy something and 5 years later, there's some regulation, roll it to something else, right? Use that and go to the next one. Go ahead, Tony.
That's a good answer. I mean, at the end of the day, it's 2025, right? Rentals have been around forever. Airbnb has now been around for long enough. A lot of the towns that we're going to regulate have regulated. I say personally, I wouldn't invest somewhere that is not a true vacation market that has demonstrated history of being pro short-term rentals. So they have some sort of regulation in place. They have for years. It's very friendly. It's a vacation town that is fully dependent on tourism. Alex said, obviously Boston's very tight. For me and him, that's obvious because we spend all our time on this. But you guys may not know, I highly, highly advise you not to do this in any big city. Cities don't like short-term rentals. It's easy for some governor to be like, oh, that's why rent's so high. It's complete bullshit between you and I, but it's easy for them to say that anyway. So that would be the best advice is pick a town with regulation. It's been in place for years. It's a vacation market. They're pro short-term rental. There's always some risk, but I mean, in our opinion, it's pretty low if you're doing that.
Yep. The state rules matter too.
What was
Florida
next?
and Arizona, for example, have said you can't restrict how private property is being used. So the towns are fighting that out. The Poconos is another area. Cape Cod is a great area. They can't get rid of tourism there. That's how they survive. So I'll go to Christopher next. Switching from LTR to STR. Rarely do those work. They're different products. It's like
Agreed.
taking an iPhone and telling it to drive you down the street. It's a different product. So we can look at that, but I've never really seen a long-term work well as a short-term. So 1031 exchange could work. Or if you talk to somebody like Devlin, you say, hey, I've got this 2-family. Can I pull money out of it? Or can you look at this and say, my mortgage is all set on the 2-family. Give me a DSCR for my next one. Having multiple eggs in a few baskets is really important, right? So I still invest in long-term rentals, but the last few years have been heavy on short-term.
And Alex, can I add real quickly with that question of Christopher's? Once you claim cost segregation, say it's a long-term rental and it's going to be a passive offset, it's going to be locked in as passive. So if you have a property and doing a 1031 into a short-term rental is a great strategy. But there's also, depending on Tony's point and your point, Alex, of depending on what market you're in, maybe you convert the long-term rental that you do have to a short-term because the market dictates, hey, this will be a good spot. Once it's converted over and, hey, you meet the material participation test requirements, you might be able to get the benefit to flow through to your active income, and you didn't have to switch properties. So there are some logistics.
I stand corrected. That's why I invited Derek. He knows his shit. So sounds like there's a good benefit to do it. And then maybe if you switch it back, are you in a heap of shit, or it needs to be while that property's in service?
Yeah, there's a little bit of, like nuances there that happy to talk to folks. But in terms of thinking about your properties, if you want to switch out of it to a brand new one, 1031 is a great strategy, but maybe the market dictates where I can use the same property and flip it from long-term to short-term and get the benefit through cost seg.
Awesome. All right, so we've got 2 more slides, and then if you guys want to stay on for a few more minutes, we're happy to hang out and answer questions. But question number 1 is, where should we do our next in-person event? I believe all 4 of us will be there. We're thinking like a brewery or something like that. Feel free to throw some comments in the chat. And then I want it to be something that you can bring your wife and kids to. You can network, but I want to have a fun day. We're obviously going to pick up the check on that. So if you have any good ideas of where we should do this, feel free to throw them in the chat. And then your offer for showing up today, we're going to give you 20% off. So you can go see how the sausage is made, right? Book one of my properties. We'll give you 20% off. And then, go see how it's done. See how the linen closet is stocked. See which videos I use, which technology and automations to provide a good stay. So definitely take advantage of that. If you book anytime this year, for a stay anytime this year, by the end of August, you'll get this offer. All right. Any last minute questions, or Andrew had one here. Can you take that one, Derek? Is the 481A adjustable a red flag?
No,
those
are under the tax code. Those are needed. I think any red flag potentially would come from not working with the correct person and making sure your numbers are and study are done the right way. But
Derek, correct me if I'm wrong. If you get audited, doesn't aiming your company support in some fashion? How does that work?
Yep. So if they were to question the cost segregation study, aiming will step in, guide you through that process, both on the agent and appeals level, all the hours needed until it is resolved. And we do have attorneys on staff. One of our managing directors is an attorney by trade. So we understand the tax codes, applying it, but also going through the studies. We make sure that we can 100% substantiate any numbers in the study that we do put in front, because at the end of the day, if we can't support it under audit, then why are we doing it? But we go through, make sure that we can stand by it, and then we'll defend you if it were to be questioned.
Good to know. All right, Tiago, you said, I'm not sure my message went through. You can drop it in again in the chat. I don't see one.
I have a place in a super saturated market, Orlando. If I wanted to sell it, probably the best option, find a better market, right? Yeah, what's your thoughts, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the hardest thing because you put so much work and effort and design into it. But if you've got a loser and you've tried everything you can to maximize it, like if you got something in the winter and you've added a sauna and a hot tub and a pickleball court, and maybe you did an addition and it's still not performing to what you need, you should call somebody like me and say, Alex, what else do you have for your pocket listings? Which listings do you know that already perform this well? And if you can find something that's turnkey that you know is going to produce without as much speculation, like Tony and I just did a deal in December where the place was an Airbnb for 8 years, not well managed professionally, only rented in the summer, old furniture, old paint, but it was already doing 180 grand just in the summer. So when we got our client to buy it, we knew it was going to crush. And what's that one on pace to do, Tony, this year? Like 250 or so?
It was doing 150, and now it's already over 200. And we launched it earlier this year, and it should do like 240. But there's a ramp period. hopefully next year it's like 260 to 280.
Yep. And last thing for Tiago is you can do what's called a 1031 exchange. If you have a capital gain on that, let's say you bought it for 500, it's worth $1 million. You buy something new that performs better for $1 million, you won't pay tax on that gain if you do that properly. I also have a 1031 agent that works on my team. You can use her as well.
Yeah. I would say, Tiago, talk to guys like me and Alex who do it at some scale. Quick note on saturation. Like, everybody's worried about it. In some cases, it's a real thing, and like it's hard to get into that market. But just think about how insane it would sound to say like, "Oh, New York City is a saturated market to go sell my product in." Like, I'm gonna go to Oklahoma instead. Like, it doesn't make any sense, right? It's saturated because there's tons of money there. There's tons of people there. Like, there are people making crazy money in all of these saturated markets. It's just a matter of, are you in a position where you can be one of those people? You might have to buy a $2 million house to compete. You might have to do crazy stuff. Maybe it doesn't make sense for you. So anyway, reach out to experts or, people in that market even. You may want to sell it. I don't know. I will say that's like the hardest market from my understanding in the whole country, is like that Kissimmee, Orlando area.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll help you find a way to transition out of there.
Yeah.
All right.
Anybody else? I think we're a bit over, but if there's any other questions, we got a little bit of time.
Yeah, guys, for the panelists, if you want to drop your LinkedIn profiles into here, that way people can connect with you for follow-up.
Andrew, that has definitely happened. I don't know if that got answered, but definitely.
Yes.
Connect with these guys. There's other good resources and videos we can point you towards from CPAs about that. If you want to do this stuff, you want to do it the right way and document things and work with a professional for sure. But it's not like a bunch of Airbnb guys like me and Alex came up with this stuff. Like, it was written into IRS tax code, and all we're doing is using the tax code as written, which is what wealthy people do.
All right. We're going to do a little bit of a powwow here for the next 5 or 10 minutes. If you have more questions, bring it in. But I was going to ask Devlin, what are rates looking like? I'm sure everyone wants to know what's the rate on a regular conventional mortgage with good credit. What are we seeing today? Are we going to see the Fed cut rates in September?
If I knew that answer, I probably would. I'd have 50 Airbnb properties right now. Rates, they change every day, so I can tell you right now, and by 3 o'clock it could change again. The truth is, we're just in a volatile environment. You're going to see stuff with a 6 handle and a 7 handle for the same Fed funds rate. If they do nothing at the same meeting, we might go back into the 7s. If they do nothing and say, hey, but we're going to cut later on, we might hit a 5 handle. But you're generally seeing right around 6 or 7%. I will say the DSCR is a little bit better than the conventional right now. That is because it has a prepayment penalty. 1 year, 3 year, 5 year. Obviously, the 1 year prepayment penalty is going to give you the worst rate possible. 5 years is going to give you the best. In an environment like this, where we think their rates they will come down. I mean, if it's not now, probably in May when a new Fed chair is appointed. If we're in an environment like this where we think they're going to go down, I personally would take the slightly higher rate as long as the numbers work, just to acquire the property. And then we're going to optimize it later. You're going to refinance, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of hot takes on the rates right now. I personally, I bought most of my properties in the 3s and 4s, which makes me a little bit spoiled, but I'm so thankful the rates went up because it kind of slowed me down, made me focus and grow revenue at each individual one. And then I think it's a really good thing for the health of the supply of Airbnb. If everyone could buy one of these at 2, 3, 4%, guess what? Everybody would. So to me, the demand is still growing in Airbnb, but the supply, the amount of Airbnbs is not growing as fast as we saw during COVID. In fact, a lot of people that bought just any old shitty rickety property that thought was going to do well, they're failing now and they're selling it off to somebody who's, either fixing it up or living there full time. So like the interest rates going up, it sounds scary, but I think it's good for an investor like me. It means not as many people are going to try to compete with me. And keep in mind, even if there's interest rates at 7 or 8% on a 500,000, call it $1 million mortgage, that's $80,000 in interest per year. But you're writing that $80,000 off your rental income. So if you make 80 grand on your rental income, that's the total income. You're wiping it out just with the interest alone.
Right. And I mean, with real estate, it's how do you acquire this property, right? Most of these places are you're basically buying a business that's going to cash flow for you, right? So if it means I have to pay a 7.5 right now, it is what it is, right? If you get too caught up on interest rates, sometimes you end up missing out on a property, especially if once you get the property, now you're going to talk to Derek, now you're going to talk to Tony, and how do I optimize this property going forward? The mortgage is the same thing. Once the rates come down, I'm just going to refi. More than likely, when rates go down, property value usually appreciates. If someone is already desensitized right now at a 7.5%, we'll say we'll say a 7.5%, and they're paying a $7,000 mortgage, the shock factor is already there. They're used to it. This is just what it is nowadays. So if rates come down, say that same property was $1 million you paid for it, rates come down, now that mortgage to bring that mortgage to the same $7,000 payment monthly, you're just going to pay 1.3 for the property, 1.4, right? So people only care about these monthly payments. So long story short, get in always the right time to buy real estate's always now. And they always say that, and it's proven itself over and over.
Just make sure the deal makes sense today.
Of course, right.
And to add on to that, if you're working with Tony, you're working with Devlin or Alex, from a standpoint of cost segregation, we're at the max. We're at 100%. Can't go any higher than 100% that benefit in a given year. I can help to run numbers in terms of helping some of his clients plan. What if I do short-term rental? What do we got here in terms of a benefit? And getting those numbers as we're closing in on closing. So then you've got an idea of, okay, for the next tax year, I'm going to be able to get this amount from cost segregation that can be a renovation project or hey, I want to stack on top of this. So don't let those interest rates necessarily scare you, because the cost segregation benefit is huge at this moment.
Awesome. I think with that, we'll wrap off and sign off here. But thank you, everybody who dialed in. Really appreciate your time. And I believe this Google, it says it's automatically recorded. You should get a follow-up as well as a thank you email with the coupon code. Hopefully you come stay at one of the properties and see how we do it. Thanks, everybody, and thanks to the panelists as well.
Thank you.
Derek, Devlin, see you soon, guys.
See you guys.
Thank you, everybody.